I watched my sister Jessica's fingers deliberately tear through the concert tickets, while my 8-year-old daughter Emma's face crumpled in disbelief. The sound of ripping paper cut through the living room silence as Jessica smirked and said, "Your kids don't deserve front row anything. They should learn their place." My 11-year-old son Tyler stood frozen, clutching the lyric sheets he'd been practicing all week. My father Frank crossed his arms and backed her up without hesitation. "Stop acting broke, Arnold. You can buy new ones if you actually care." I didn't react outwardly, but something fundamental shifted inside me as I stared at the destroyed pieces scattered across the coffee table. The tickets lying in shreds represented more than just a concert. They symbolized 2 years of rebuilding my relationship with my children after the divorce from their mother, Sarah, tore our family apart. As a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, I'd finally earned a promotion that came with a substantial bonus. Instead of spending it on myself, I'd purchased front row seats to see their favorite band Thunder Valley, knowing how much this meant to them during our limited weekend visits. My divorce had been brutal. Sarah constantly criticized my commitment to supporting my unemployed sister and our widowed father. She claimed I prioritized their needs over our family's financial security. The arguments became toxic, with Sarah threatening to seek full custody if I didn't stop throwing money away on relatives who refused to help themselves. Eventually, I chose to end the marriage rather than abandon people I thought needed me. Jessica had moved back into our childhood home 14 months ago after her tech startup supposedly collapsed. She painted herself as a victim of economic circumstances, claiming potential employers discriminated against her innovative ideas. My father Frank, who'd been struggling since Mom's death 3 years earlier, welcomed Jessica back with open arms. He said she provided companionship and helped maintain the house that had become too much for him to manage alone. I'd stepped up financially without question. Jessica's car payments, insurance premiums, and phone bills all ran through automatic transfers from my account. I covered groceries for their household utility bills when they fell behind, and even Jessica's student loan payments. Frank constantly reinforced my obligation through guilt-laden phone calls about family loyalty and remembering who raised me with love and sacrifice. The burden stretched my budget thin, especially with child support payments to Sarah. My children only visited every other weekend due to the custody arrangement, making each moment precious. I'd saved for months to afford these concert tickets, imagining Emma and Tyler's excitement as their heroes performed just feet away from them. But standing in that living room watching Jessica casually destroy something that meant everything to my kids, I started questioning the entire dynamic. Her boyfriend Derek lounged on the couch behind her, scrolling through his phone without acknowledging the scene unfolding. Something he said caught my attention as I gathered the ticket fragments. "Babe, did you book our Miami flights for next week?" The resort confirmation came through this morning. Miami, resort, next week. Jessica, who claimed she couldn't afford job interview clothes, was planning a luxury vacation. The woman I'd been supporting for over a year had money for tropical getaways, while my children stood surrounded by pieces of their ruined dreams. My hands stopped collecting the torn tickets. Frank cleared his throat uncomfortably when he noticed my stillness. Jessica's confident smirk wavered slightly as she registered the change in my expression. Derek continued browsing his phone, oblivious to the tension building around him. "Miami sounds expensive," I said quietly, making eye contact with Jessica for the first time since she destroyed the tickets. "Derek's treating me," she replied quickly, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. I deserve some happiness after everything I've been through. Everything she'd been through. 14 months of free housing, financial support, and emotional coddling while she allegedly searched for employment. I realized I'd never actually seen evidence of her job hunting. No interview outfits hanging in her closet, no rejection letters, no networking events or career fairs. Just complaints about an unfair economy and expectations that I'd continue funding her lifestyle indefinitely. The pieces of torn tickets in my palm suddenly felt heavier. My children needed to see their father stand up for them, even when it meant confronting people who shared our blood. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying not to cry in front of the adults who just crushed her excitement. Tyler put a protective arm around his sister's shoulders, already learning to shield her from disappointment. I stood up slowly, slipping the ticket fragments into my pocket. Jessica and Frank watched me with uncertainty, recognizing that something fundamental had shifted in the room's atmosphere. Derek finally looked up from his phone, sensing tension he couldn't quite identify. "Kids wait for me in the car," I said calmly. "We're going home." The drive back to my apartment gave me time to process what I'd witnessed. Emma and Tyler sat quietly in the back seat, occasionally whispering to each other about the concert they'd no longer attend. Their subdued voices sparked a protective anger I hadn't felt since the divorce proceedings. Someone needed to advocate for these children, and clearly that responsibility fell entirely on my shoulders. Over the following days, I began investigating Jessica's actual activities instead of accepting her stories at face value. Her social media profiles, which I'd never bothered examining closely, revealed a different narrative than her claims of poverty and desperation. Photos from expensive restaurants dotted her timeline, tagged with friends I didn't recognize. Designer handbags appeared in selfies taken at upscale shopping centers. Her posts showed a lifestyle that contradicted everything she told me about her financial struggles. I confronted Frank during one of his regular guilt trip phone calls about family obligations. When I mentioned Jessica's apparent spending habits, he immediately became defensive and accusatory. According to him, I was being selfish and paranoid, looking for excuses to abandon family members who needed support during difficult times. He claimed Jessica's friends occasionally treated her to meals and shopping trips out of sympathy for her unemployment situation. "You've always been jealous of the attention Jessica receives." Frank said, his voice taking on the manipulative tone I'd grown to recognize. "Your mother worried you'd become bitter about not being the baby of the family anymore." The comment stung because it targeted insecurities I'd carried since childhood. But instead of retreating into guilt and compliance as usual, I decided to gather concrete evidence before drawing conclusions. I requested copies of my bank statements going back 6 months, something I should have been monitoring more carefully all along. The patterns I discovered made my stomach clench with betrayal. Charges I didn't recognize appeared regularly on my credit card. Small amounts always under $50, but frequent enough to total significant sums over time. Restaurant bills, retail purchases, and online shopping transactions I'd never authorized. Someone had been using my financial information for months without my knowledge or permission. I decided to visit the family house unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon when Jessica thought I was at work. My key still opened the front door, though I knocked first to announce my presence. No one answered, but I could hear movement upstairs. I climbed the familiar staircase to find Jessica sitting at Frank's desk, surrounded by opened envelopes and scattered papers. She jumped when she saw me hastily gathering documents and stuffing them into drawers. But I'd already seen enough to understand what was happening. Credit card offers, bank statements, insurance documents, and financial correspondence, all addressed to me, all opened and examined by someone who had no legal right to access my private mail. "Jessica, what are you doing with my mail?" Her explanation came out in a nervous rush. She claimed she'd been trying to protect me from unnecessary stress by screening my financial documents. According to her story, she only opened obvious junk mail and bills she thought might be mistakes. She'd been planning to organize everything and present it to me in a more manageable format. But one document she hadn't managed to hide caught my attention. A credit card application partially completed in handwriting that resembled mine, but contained subtle differences in letter formation. My name, address, and social security number were filled in accurately. The employment information listed my current job with correct details about my salary and position. Someone had been planning to open a credit account using my identity. Jessica, did you fill out this credit card application? Tears began streaming down her face as she broke into dramatic sobs. She claimed she'd only been trying to help establish better credit in my name. According to her increasingly frantic explanation, she'd researched credit improvement strategies and learned that multiple accounts could boost overall scores. She insisted she'd never intended to use the card herself, only to help strengthen my financial profile. Frank arrived home while Jessica was mid-breakdown, immediately rushing to her defense without asking for details about the situation. He accused me of harassing his daughter and invading their privacy by entering the house unannounced. When I tried to explain about the intercepted mail and forged credit application, he dismissed my concerns as paranoid accusations born from jealousy and resentment. The pattern became crystal clear as I stood in that familiar kitchen, watching two people I'd supported and trusted gaslight me about evidence I'd discovered with my own eyes. This wasn't about temporary financial assistance during a rough patch. This was about systematic manipulation and identity theft disguised as family loyalty. My phone rang as the argument escalated. Emma's voice came through the speaker, excited and hopeful despite the previous day's disappointment. "Daddy, we've been practicing the Thunder Valley songs again. Tyler learned the guitar parts, and I memorized all the words. When you get new tickets, we'll be ready to sing along from the front row." The innocent optimism in her voice cut through my anger and refocused my priorities. These children trusted me to protect them and follow through on my promises. Jessica and Frank had stolen more than money from me. They'd stolen my ability to provide experiences that brought joy to the two people who mattered most in my world. I ended the call without making promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Jessica and Frank watched me carefully, recognizing that something fundamental had changed in our family dynamic. The days of automatic compliance and guilt-driven generosity were ending, whether they understood it or not. Friday evening arrived with the anticipation that always accompanied my children's weekend visits. Despite the previous week's disaster with the concert tickets, Emma and Tyler bounded into my apartment with their usual energy and excitement. They'd prepared a surprise for me during their week, with Sarah having practiced Thunder Valley songs to perform an impromptu concert in my living room. Emma had written out all the lyrics in her careful third-grade handwriting, decorating the pages with colorful drawings of musical notes and hearts. Tyler had used YouTube tutorials to learn basic guitar chords on the acoustic instrument I'd bought him for his birthday. Their enthusiasm was infectious, temporarily lifting the dark cloud that had settled over my thoughts since discovering Jessica's financial manipulations. "Dad, we figured out how to harmonize on the chorus," Emma announced, proudly positioning herself next to Tyler, who held his guitar with newfound confidence. "Even without the real concert, we can still enjoy the music together." Their resilience amazed me. While the adults in their lives created drama and destruction, these children adapted and found creative solutions to disappointment. They deserved better than having their joy weaponized by relatives who should have been protecting their happiness instead of destroying it. Saturday morning brought an unexpected phone call from Frank, requesting that I bring the children to the family house for what he described as an important family meeting. His tone carried unusual urgency, suggesting developments I hadn't been informed about. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the visit, hoping we could resolve our differences in a way that preserved some relationship between my children and their grandfather. The atmosphere at the house felt charged with tension from the moment we walked through the front door. Jessica paced nervously in the kitchen, while Frank sat rigidly at the dining room table surrounded by financial documents and legal papers. Derek was nowhere to be seen, though his absence felt more ominous than comforting, given recent revelations about their planned vacation. Frank launched into a prepared speech about family loyalty and financial responsibility before I could even settle the children in the living room. According to him, I'd been selfish and ungrateful, threatening to abandon relatives who'd supported me throughout my childhood and young adulthood. He claimed my recent suspicious behavior and accusations were destroying the family unity that had sustained us through previous hardships. Jessica joined the conversation with renewed confidence, backing up Frank's narrative while adding her own complaints about my lack of trust and understanding. She painted herself as a victim of economic circumstances beyond her control, emphasizing how my financial support had been freely given rather than demanded or stolen. Her performance was convincing, designed to make me question my own perceptions and evidence. But then the conversation took an unexpected turn. Jessica's composure cracked under the pressure of maintaining her false narrative. In her desperation to justify her actions, she revealed information she'd kept hidden for months. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under," she said, her voice rising with emotion. "I've been trying to solve problems without bothering you, but everything keeps getting worse. The gambling debts, the credit card minimums, the threats from people who expect their money back. Gambling debts. Credit card minimums. Threats from creditors." Jessica had been living a completely different life than the one she'd presented to me. The unemployment story, the failed startup, the desperate job search, all carefully constructed lies designed to maintain my financial support, while she pursued activities that created additional obligations and dangers. Frank's face flushed with embarrassment as Jessica's admissions exposed the depth of deception they'd maintained together. He tried to interrupt her increasingly frantic explanations, but the floodgates had opened. Jessica began detailing financial decisions she'd made using money I'd provided, including online gambling sessions and high-interest credit accounts she'd opened to cover losses. "I sold some old things from the attic to cover the worst debts," she continued, seemingly unable to stop herself from revealing the full scope of her betrayal. "Just stuff that was collecting dust anyway. Baseball cards and comic books that nobody looked at anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. My childhood collection, stored in the attic since I'd moved out years ago, represented more than nostalgic memorabilia. Those baseball cards included several vintage items worth thousands of dollars each. The comic books contained first editions and rare issues I'd carefully preserved since elementary school. Together, they represented a significant financial investment and irreplaceable personal history. "Jessica, did you sell my collection from the attic?" Her defiant expression confirmed what her words had already revealed. She'd systematically stolen and sold my personal property to fund gambling activities, then used my ongoing financial support to maintain her lifestyle while concealing the theft. Frank had known about the sales, but remained silent, prioritizing Jessica's immediate needs over my rights and property. Emma and Tyler had been listening from the living room, their voices growing quieter as the adult conversation became more heated. I could see confusion and worry on their faces as they tried to understand why their aunt and grandfather were angry with their father. The concert tickets had been just the beginning. This family meeting was designed to pressure me into accepting ongoing financial abuse disguised as temporary assistance. Jessica must have sensed my growing anger because she suddenly grabbed the replacement concert tickets I'd managed to purchase that morning. In a moment of calculated cruelty, she tore them into pieces while maintaining eye contact with my children. "Your kids don't deserve front row anything," she said with a cold smile. "They should learn their place in this family hierarchy." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the destroyed tickets scattered across the coffee table for the second time in a week. Tyler's jaw clenched with an anger too mature for his 11 years. Frank nodded approvingly at Jessica's display, as if destroying children's happiness was an appropriate way to teach family lessons. "Stop acting broke, Arnold," Frank said dismissively. "You can buy new ones if you actually care about making your children happy." I stood perfectly still, processing the magnitude of cruelty I just witnessed. These people had stolen my property, forged my financial documents, manipulated my emotions, and now deliberately hurt my children to make a point about family power dynamics. The protective instincts that had driven me to provide support for over a year suddenly reversed direction. "Kids, get in the car," I said quietly. my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "We're leaving, and we're not coming back." Jessica and Frank exchanged glances, finally recognizing that they'd pushed too far. But their moment of uncertainty quickly transformed back into indignant demands for apology and compliance. They'd grown accustomed to my eventual capitulation after emotional manipulation. This time, however, something fundamental had changed. Emma and Tyler gathered their belongings without argument, sensing the finality in my tone. As we walked toward the door, Jessica called after us with threats and accusations, but her words felt powerless against the clarity that had settled over my thoughts. Frank followed us outside, demanding explanations and promising consequences for my ingratitude. I buckled my children into their car seats and started the engine while Jessica and Frank stood in the driveway still shouting justifications and demands. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see them arguing with each other, probably strategizing their next manipulation attempt. But they'd made a critical miscalculation. They'd hurt my children deliberately, publicly, and unapologetically. Every instinct that had driven me to support them now demanded I protect Emma and Tyler from further exposure to such toxicity. The family relationships I'd tried to preserve were already destroyed. Now I needed to focus on preventing additional damage. The drive home from Frank's house unfolded in contemplative silence. Emma and Tyler sensed the gravity of what had transpired without fully understanding the adult complexities behind Jessica's cruelty. They'd witnessed their aunt deliberately destroy something precious to them for the second time, watched their grandfather approve of that destruction, and seen their father reach a breaking point that changed everything about our family dynamic. "Dad," Tyler said softly from the back seat, "why did Aunt Jessica tear up our tickets again? We didn't do anything wrong." His question pierced through my anger and forced me to consider how I'd explain this situation to children who still believed adults generally acted with good intentions. How could I help them understand that some people use cruelty as a tool for control without destroying their trust in family relationships entirely? Sometimes adults make very bad choices when they're angry or scared. I replied, choosing my words carefully. "Aunt Jessica was upset about something that had nothing to do with you, but she took her feelings out on you anyway. That's not okay, and it's not something you should ever expect to accept from anyone." Emma sniffled quietly, processing the disappointment of missing another concert. "You going to buy new tickets again?" The innocent hope in her voice broke my heart and strengthened my resolve simultaneously. These children deserved experiences that brought them joy, not weapons used against them by adults who couldn't manage their own emotional responses. But before I could provide those experiences safely, I needed to address the systematic financial abuse that had been undermining my ability to support my family properly. "We'll figure out something even better than the concert. I promised, though, I wasn't sure yet what that might entail. But first, Daddy needs to handle some grown-up problems that have been going on too long." That evening, after settling Emma and Tyler with a movie and popcorn, I began the systematic process of severing every financial connection that bound me to Jessica and Frank. The automatic transfers that had seemed like simple family support now revealed themselves as enablers of theft, manipulation, and emotional abuse. I logged into my bank account and methodically canceled each recurring payment. Jessica's car payment, which I'd been covering for 14 months, her insurance premium, which kept her vehicle legal and protected, her phone service, which allowed her to coordinate schemes against my financial security, the grocery allowances, utility contributions, and miscellaneous support payments that had totaled hundreds of dollars each month. Each cancellation felt like removing shackles I'd voluntarily placed on my own wrists. For over a year, I'd prioritized their comfort over my children's opportunities, their demands over my family's stability. The money I'd been redirecting toward Jessica's lifestyle could have been building college funds for Emma and Tyler, creating emergency savings for unexpected expenses, or providing experiences that strengthened our father-child bonds. But the financial manipulations ran deeper than simple support payments. I needed to understand the full scope of Jessica's identity theft before I could protect myself and my children from future exploitation. I called my insurance company to remove Jessica's vehicle from my policy effective immediately. The customer service representative seemed surprised by my request, noting that the car had been involved in a minor accident the previous month that I'd never been informed about. An unreported accident meant Jessica had been using my insurance coverage for incidents she'd kept secret, potentially creating liability issues I knew nothing about. How many other risks had I unknowingly assumed through her access to my financial information? What other obligations might surface if I didn't take decisive action to separate our accounts completely? The phone rang as I worked through my list of cancellations. Frank's name appeared on the caller ID, but I let the call go to voicemail. His message, when I played it back later, contained the usual mixture of guilt, manipulation, and demands for immediate compliance. According to him, I was being childish and vindictive, punishing innocent people for misunderstandings that could be resolved through honest conversation. But honest conversation required honest participants, and I'd learned that neither Frank nor Jessica qualified for that category. They'd spent months deceiving me about fundamental aspects of their lives while demanding increasingly intrusive access to mine. The time for conversation had passed when Jessica destroyed my children's happiness to make a point about family hierarchy. I spent Sunday morning researching legal options for addressing identity theft and financial fraud. The credit card application I discovered represented just one attempt among potentially many others. Jessica's access to my personal mail meant she'd been intercepting financial documents and sensitive information for months, creating opportunities for schemes I hadn't yet discovered. The lawyer I contacted Monday morning specialized in financial crimes and family fraud cases. Her office was able to review my documentation, immediately recognizing the urgency of protecting my credit and financial accounts from ongoing manipulation. What she discovered during her preliminary investigation shocked even me, despite my growing awareness of Jessica's deception. "Mr. Arnold, your sister has been much more active than you realize," the lawyer explained, spreading documents across her desk. "We found evidence of at least 4 separate credit card applications using your information. 3 were rejected due to income verification requirements, but 1 was approved for a card you've never seen. A credit card in my name opened without my knowledge or consent, with charges dating back several months. Jessica had successfully committed identity theft on a scale that created serious legal liability for both of us. Worse yet, my name appeared as a guarantor on financial documents I'd never signed, including papers related to Frank's house and various loans I'd never authorized. Your father's reverse mortgage application lists you as a co-signer." The lawyer continued, pointing to a signature that resembled mine but contained subtle differences in pen pressure and letter formation. "If he defaults on payments, you become legally responsible for the full loan amount plus interest and penalties." The magnitude of betrayal was staggering. Jessica hadn't just stolen money or forged a few signatures. She'd systematically entangled me in financial obligations that could destroy my credit, drain my savings, and compromise my ability to provide for Emma and Tyler. Frank either knew about these forgeries or was willfully ignorant of documents he'd signed in my presence. "What are my options for protecting myself and my children?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would require difficult choices about family relationships. "Complete separation of all financial ties, criminal charges for identity theft, and civil litigation to recover damages," she replied without hesitation. "These aren't family disagreements anymore. They're serious crimes with significant financial consequences." As I drove home from the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from Jessica and Frank. They discovered the canceled payments and insurance coverage, finally understanding that their financial lifeline had been permanently severed. Their messages alternated between angry demands and desperate apologies, but none acknowledged the theft and fraud that had necessitated my protective actions. Emma and Tyler greeted me at the door with homework questions and stories about their day, blissfully unaware of the legal battles brewing around them. Their innocence reminded me why I'd chosen this course of action. They deserved a father who protected them from people who would exploit their love and trust for financial gain. The quiet revenge had begun, not with dramatic confrontations or public humiliation, but with methodical steps to reclaim my financial autonomy and legal protection. Jessica and Frank would soon discover that their victim had become an adversary capable of defending himself and his children from further manipulation. Tuesday morning brought an urgent phone call from my bank's fraud prevention department. The automated system had flagged unusual activity on my business account, triggering a security review that revealed disturbing patterns of unauthorized access. I'd established the business savings account 2 years earlier to separate my work-related earnings from personal expenses, using it primarily for tax preparation and investment planning. The fraud investigator, a professional woman named Carol Martinez, requested an immediate meeting to discuss their findings. Her tone carried the gravity of someone who'd uncovered significant criminal activity, not simple account irregularities or mistaken transactions. I rearranged my morning schedule and drove to the bank's downtown branch where Carol waited with a thick folder of documents and security footage. Mr. Arnold, we've discovered that someone has been accessing your business account using falsified identification and forged authorizations. Carol began spreading transaction records across the conference table. The pattern suggests someone with detailed knowledge of your banking habits and personal information. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. Security camera footage showed Jessica entering the bank on multiple occasions over the past 6 months, always staying under daily withdrawal limits that wouldn't trigger automatic reporting requirements. She'd used fake identification bearing my name, and her photograph claiming to be authorized to access the account on my behalf. How did she bypass the security questions and verification procedures I asked, studying the transaction timestamps that revealed a sophisticated pattern of theft? She provided accurate answers to all security questions, including your mother's maiden name, first pet's name, and elementary school, Carol replied. She also knew your account balance and recent transaction history, which convinced our tellers she had legitimate access. Jessica's access to my personal mail had provided more than just opportunities for credit card fraud. She'd been systematizing, studying my financial documents, learning the answers to security questions, and familiarizing herself with my banking patterns. Frank's phone number was listed as my emergency contact, allowing Jessica to receive verification calls if tellers had any doubts about her identity. The total theft amounted to nearly $20,000, carefully extracted over 6 months, in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. She'd researched daily withdrawal limits, spacing her visits to different branch locations, and varying her timing to avoid establishing recognizable patterns that might prompt closer scrutiny. This represents systematic financial fraud with potential federal charges, Carol explained. The amount exceeds state thresholds, and the use of falsified identification elevates this to identity theft with serious criminal penalties. Federal charges, criminal penalties. The woman I'd been supporting financially was facing potential prison time for stealing money I'd earned to support my children's future. The irony was staggering. While I'd been voluntarily transferring hundreds of dollars monthly to Jessica's accounts, she'd been secretly stealing thousands more through elaborate fraud schemes. My phone rang during the meeting. Sarah's name appeared on the caller ID, and Carol gestured for me to take the call. Sarah's voice carried the sharp edge of frustration I'd learned to recognize during our marriage and subsequent divorce proceedings. "Arnold, the child support payment bounced again this month," she said without preamble. "This is the 3rd time in 6 months. What's going on with your finances?" The child support payments. Jessica's theft had drained the account I used for my most important financial obligation, creating problems with my ex-wife and potentially affecting my custody arrangement. Sarah interpreted the missed payments as evidence of financial irresponsibility or deliberate manipulation, not knowing that my sister was systematically stealing money meant for Emma and Tyler's care. "Sarah, there's been fraudulent activity on my account," I explained, watching Carol nod approvingly at my honesty. "Someone has been stealing money for months, and I'm working with the bank to resolve it. The child support will be covered as soon as they complete their investigation." Fraudulent activity, Arnold. Are you making up stories to avoid your responsibilities? Sarah's skepticism was understandable given our contentious history, but it stung nonetheless. Carol intervened, taking the phone and introducing herself as the bank's fraud investigator. She provided Sarah with enough details to confirm the legitimacy of my claims without violating privacy regulations. The conversation helped establish that I'd been the victim of crimes rather than the perpetrator of financial negligence. After ending the call, Carol returned to her documentation of Jessica's theft patterns. Each withdrawal had been carefully planned and executed, suggesting someone with extensive knowledge of banking procedures and fraud prevention systems. Jessica had researched my account thoroughly, learning my habits well enough to impersonate me convincingly across multiple branch locations. "Your sister demonstrated sophisticated understanding of our security protocols," Carol observed. "This wasn't opportunistic theft. She planned and executed a complex fraud scheme over an extended period." The psychological impact hit me harder than the financial loss. Jessica hadn't stolen impulsively during a moment of desperation. She'd methodically studied my life, learned my vulnerabilities, and exploited my trust through carefully planned criminal acts. Every family gathering, every conversation about my work and finances, every moment of apparent bonding had been opportunities for her to gather intelligence for her fraud schemes. My phone buzzed with text messages as Carol compiled her final report. Jessica and Frank had discovered their canceled support payments and were demanding immediate explanations. Their messages alternated between angry accusations and desperate apologies, but none acknowledged the systematic theft that had necessitated my protective actions. "Mr. Arnold, we need to file a criminal report and begin recovery proceedings," Carol said, pushing a stack of forms across the table. "The evidence is clear, and the amounts involved require law enforcement intervention. Filing criminal charges against my sister felt like crossing a line I'd never imagined approaching. But the alternative meant accepting ongoing victimization while my children suffered the consequences of Jessica's crimes. The money she'd stolen belonged to Emma and Tyler's future as much as mine." I signed the paperwork, authorizing the criminal investigation and civil recovery proceedings. Carol explained that the bank would work with law enforcement to gather additional evidence and pursue prosecution. Jessica's sophisticated fraud scheme would likely result in federal charges carrying substantial penalties, including possible imprisonment. As I left the bank, my phone rang again. This time, Jessica's name appeared on the caller ID. Her voice carried a desperation I'd never heard before, alternating between threats and pleading apologies as she realized the scope of consequences she was facing. "Arnold, you have to fix this banking problem," she said, her words tumbling together in panic. "I can explain everything if you'll just listen. It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. Systematic theft, identity fraud, and manipulation disguised as family loyalty. Jessica had gambled with my financial security and lost, creating legal problems that would define her life for years to come. The trap had sprung not through any elaborate scheme on my part, but through Jessica's own criminal choices and the banking industry's fraud prevention systems. My role had simply been to stop enabling her theft and start protecting myself and my children from further victimization. The quiet revenge was becoming very loud indeed. Wednesday morning arrived with a phone call that changed everything. Detective Ray Morrison from the County Sheriff's Financial Crimes Unit requested a meeting to discuss the criminal charges I'd filed against Jessica. His calm, professional demeanor couldn't mask the serious nature of what he'd discovered during his preliminary investigation into the bank fraud case. "Mr. Arnold, your sister's activities extend beyond simple theft," Detective Morrison explained as we sat in his office surrounded by evidence boxes and computer printouts. "We've uncovered a pattern of identity fraud affecting multiple financial institutions and potentially other family members. The investigation had revealed that Jessica's schemes weren't limited to my accounts. She'd attempted to open credit cards using Frank's information, applied for personal loans using falsified employment data, and even tried to refinance their house using forged documents. The reverse mortgage paperwork with my forged signature was just one element in a complex web of financial fraud." "How extensive is the criminal activity?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would be worse than I'd imagined. "Extensive enough to warrant federal intervention," Detective Morrison replied, pulling out a thick folder of evidence. "We're looking at identity theft, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges. Your sister could face up to 20 years in federal prison if convicted on all counts." 20 years. The woman who'd been living in my childhood home supported by my earnings was facing potential decades in prison for crimes she'd committed against family members who'd trusted her completely. The magnitude of her betrayal was staggering. But the legal consequences were about to become equally overwhelming. Detective Morrison explained that Jessica would be arrested within 48 hours once the federal warrant was processed. Her sophisticated fraud schemes had crossed state lines through electronic banking systems, elevating local crimes to federal jurisdiction with much harsher penalties than state courts typically imposed. My phone rang as we discussed the arrest timeline. Frank's name appeared on the caller ID, but his voice carried an edge of panic I'd never heard before. He'd received official notices about the criminal investigation and was demanding that I intervene to protect Jessica from prosecution. "Arnold, you have to stop this legal nonsense immediately," Frank said, his words tumbling together in desperation. "Jessica made some mistakes, but she's family. We handle family problems privately, not through police and lawyers." But these weren't family problems anymore. They were federal crimes with victims, evidence, and consequences that extended far beyond our personal relationships. Jessica's choices had created legal obligations that no amount of family loyalty could resolve or eliminate. Frank Jessica stole nearly $20,000 from accounts I used to support my children. I replied, watching Detective Morrison nod approvingly at my direct response. "She forged my signature on legal documents and opened credit accounts using stolen identity information. These are serious crimes, not family misunderstandings. She'll pay back every penny," Frank promised, though his voice lacked conviction. "Just drop the charges and give her a chance to make this right." Detective Morrison gestured for the phone, introducing himself and explaining the legal realities Frank was refusing to acknowledge. Criminal investigations couldn't be stopped by family agreements once federal agencies became involved. The evidence would proceed through proper legal channels regardless of personal relationships or financial restitution offers. Thursday morning brought news that the arrest warrant had been executed. Jessica was taken into custody at Frank's house while attempting to destroy evidence of her fraud schemes. Police found burned documents in the backyard fire pit, including financial records and identification materials she'd used for her illegal activities. Frank's frantic phone calls began immediately after the arrest. He demanded that I post Jessica's $50,000 bail and drop all criminal charges in exchange for family reconciliation. According to him, I was destroying our family's unity for money that could be repaid through reasonable payment arrangements. But bail money and repayment plans couldn't undo the systematic betrayal of trust that had poisoned our relationships permanently. Jessica hadn't made impulsive mistakes during moments of desperation. She'd planned and executed complex criminal schemes over extended periods while maintaining the facade of loving family relationships. "I won't enable Jessica's criminal behavior by posting bail or dropping charges," I told Frank during one particularly heated conversation. She created this situation through her own choices, and she'll face the consequences through proper legal channels. Frank's response revealed how deeply he'd been complicit in Jessica's schemes. He admitted knowing about some of her financial strategies, but claimed he'd believed they were legitimate business arrangements rather than criminal fraud. His willful ignorance had enabled Jessica's crimes while protecting him from acknowledging his own role in facilitating them. The consequences began cascading rapidly as various financial institutions discovered their connections to Jessica's fraud schemes. Her car was repossessed when my canceled insurance coverage left it unprotected. Utility companies threatened service disconnections when automatic payments from my account stopped arriving. Credit card companies demanded immediate payment for accounts I'd never authorized. Most significantly, the reverse mortgage company sent Frank a notice demanding immediate payment of the full loan amount plus penalties. My removal from the guarantor list had triggered an acceleration clause requiring complete repayment within 30 days. Frank owed over $200,000 to prevent foreclosure on the house he'd planned to leave to Jessica. "Arnold, you have to help us save the house," Frank pleaded during one of his increasingly desperate phone calls. "This is your childhood home. Your mother's memory is connected to every room and garden." But my mother's memory deserved better than being weaponized to enable financial fraud and identity theft. The house might have contained sentimental value, but it couldn't justify continuing to support criminal activities or enabling people who'd systematically betrayed my trust. Jessica's calls from jail were equally desperate but less emotionally manipulative. She'd apparently received legal counsel who'd explained the serious federal charges she was facing. Her previous confidence had transformed into genuine fear as she realized the potential consequences of her criminal choices. "Arnold, I never meant for things to go this far," Jessica said during one collect call I chose to accept. "I was trying to solve problems without bothering you, but everything kept getting more complicated." "Jessica, you stole nearly $20,000 and forged legal documents." I replied, maintaining the calm tone I'd practiced during conversations with Detective Morrison. These weren't solutions to problems. They were crimes that created bigger problems for everyone involved. "I can make it right if you'll just give me a chance," she pleaded. "Drop the charges and I'll get help for the gambling addiction. I'll pay back every penny with interest." But making it right would require accountability through proper legal channels, not family agreements that had failed repeatedly in the past. Jessica's gambling addiction might explain her motivation, but it couldn't excuse her criminal methods or eliminate the consequences of her choices. Emma and Tyler noticed the constant phone calls and tense conversations, asking questions about why I seemed worried and distracted during our weekend visits. I explained the situation in age-appropriate terms, emphasizing that sometimes adults make very bad choices that create serious consequences for themselves and others. "Will Aunt Jessica go to prison?" Emma asked with the innocent directness that children bring to complex adult situations. "That depends on what a judge and jury decide based on the evidence," I replied honestly. "But she did things that hurt a lot of people, including our family, and now she has to face the consequences." Tyler, who'd been listening quietly, asked the question that struck closest to home. "Will we still have money for college and things we need?" "Yes, buddy. We'll be fine because I'm working to fix the problems and protect our family's future," I assured him. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making difficult decisions about other people who hurt them. The cascade of consequences was far from over, but the pattern was becoming clear. Jessica's criminal choices were creating legal, financial, and emotional problems for everyone connected to her schemes. Frank's enabling behavior was costing him his house and his relationship with his son. My decision to pursue justice was protecting my children's future while holding criminals accountable for their actions. The quiet revenge was becoming a very public demonstration of how consequences follow choices regardless of family relationships or emotional manipulation. 6 months later, the legal proceedings had reached their resolution through plea agreements that brought both justice and closure to our fractured family situation. Jessica accepted responsibility for her crimes to avoid the risk of federal trial and potential maximum sentences that could have meant decades in prison. Her final plea agreement included guilty charges for identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy resulting in 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The sentence also required full restitution of stolen funds, plus penalties, community service focused on financial literacy education, and mandatory participation in gambling addiction treatment programs. Detective Morrison explained that Jessica's cooperation with the investigation had helped recover most of the stolen money through asset seizures and insurance claims. The bank's fraud protection policies covered portions of my losses, while legal proceedings against Jessica's co-conspirators yielded additional recovery funds that exceeded my original expectations. Your decision to pursue criminal charges rather than accept family pressure made this recovery possible, Detective Morrison noted during our final meeting. Victims who don't report crimes rarely recover their losses or prevent future victimization. Frank lost the family house to foreclosure, but I helped him find suitable senior living arrangements that provided the care and community support he needed at this stage of his life. His initial anger about the criminal charges had gradually transformed into grudging acceptance that Jessica's actions had left him with no viable alternatives. The most significant change was Frank's acknowledgement of his role in enabling Jessica's criminal behavior. During family counseling sessions required by the court, he admitted that his fear of being alone had caused him to ignore obvious warning signs and facilitate schemes he knew were probably illegal. I wanted to believe Jessica was just creative with money rather than dishonest, Frank said, during one particularly difficult session. I was so afraid of losing my last remaining child that I helped her steal from my son. His honesty opened the door to rebuilding a relationship based on truth rather than manipulation. We established clear boundaries about financial support and family obligations with professional oversight to ensure healthy communication patterns going forward. Emma and Tyler adapted to the changes with remarkable resilience, showing more emotional maturity than many adults in our extended family. They understood that their father had protected them from people who were making harmful choices, and they appreciated the improved financial stability that resulted from ending the systematic theft. The concert tickets that had started this entire confrontation were eventually replaced with something far more meaningful. I used a portion of the recovered funds to purchase VIP backstage passes for Thunder Valley's next tour, giving the children an experience that exceeded their original front-row expectations. Meeting their musical heroes backstage transformed the destroyed tickets from symbols of cruelty into catalysts for extraordinary experiences. Emma and Tyler got to perform their practiced songs for the band members, who were genuinely impressed by their dedication and talent. The lead singer signed their guitar and encouraged Tyler to continue developing his musical abilities. "Dad, this is way better than just watching from the front row," Emma said, as we posed for pictures with the band. "We got to actually talk to them and show them what we learned." Tyler nodded enthusiastically, still clutching the signed guitar. "It's like Jessica accidentally helped us get something even better by being mean." Their perspective reminded me that destructive actions sometimes create opportunities for better outcomes when we respond with integrity rather than revenge. The money Jessica stole had been recovered with penalties that enabled experiences I couldn't have afforded otherwise. Her criminal choices had inadvertently provided my children with memories that would last their lifetimes. My promotion at work came through during this period, bringing both increased salary and recognition for the integrity I demonstrated during the family crisis. Several colleagues had provided character references for the legal proceedings, noting my professionalism and reliability even during personal difficulties. The raise allowed me to establish substantial college funds for both children, creating educational security that Jessica's theft had temporarily threatened. I also built emergency savings accounts that would protect us from future financial manipulation or unexpected hardships. Sarah's attitude toward me improved significantly once she understood the full scope of what had happened. She acknowledged that my family loyalty hadn't been enabling freeloaders, but supporting people she'd incorrectly assumed were genuinely in need. Her apology was gracious and helped establish better co-parenting communication going forward. I misjudged your motivations during our marriage, Sarah admitted during one of our custody exchange conversations. I thought you were choosing them over us, but you were just being taken advantage of by people who knew how to exploit your kindness. The most unexpected development came through a letter Jessica sent from prison after completing her first 6 months of sentence. The correspondence contained genuine remorse rather than manipulation, suggesting that prison counseling and addiction treatment were helping her understand the impact of her choices on other people. Arnold, I know apologies can't undo the harm I caused, but I want you to know that I finally understand what I took from you and your children, she wrote. The money was just part of it. I stole your trust, peace of mind, and ability to provide for Emma and Tyler without worry. Her letter continued with specific acknowledgments of each harmful action, from destroying the concert tickets to forging legal documents to systematically stealing from accounts meant to support my children's future. She didn't ask for forgiveness or early contact, simply expressed understanding of the consequences her choices had created. I'm learning about addiction and the ways it made me rationalize hurting people I love. The letter continued. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repair the damage, but I want to become someone who deserves another chance rather than someone who just demands it. Frank visited Jessica in prison regularly and reported that she was genuinely committed to rehabilitation programs and personal accountability work. Her participation in financial literacy courses was helping other inmates understand the long-term consequences of criminal financial choices. The transformation wasn't complete or guaranteed, but it represented hope for genuine change, rather than superficial compliance designed to manipulate future opportunities. Real redemption requires acknowledgement of harm caused, acceptance of consequences imposed, and commitment to different choices going forward. 9 months after the initial confrontation, I sat in my living room, watching Emma and Tyler practice new songs on their instruments, preparing for a school talent show performance. The peace in our home reflected financial security, emotional stability, and freedom from people who'd weaponized family loyalty against our well-being. Dad, do you think Aunt Jessica will ever be part of our family again? Emma asked during a quiet moment between songs. Maybe someday if she continues working to become someone who builds people up instead of tearing them down, I replied honestly. But that's her choice to make, and our job is to build a good life, regardless of what she decides. Tyler strummed his guitar thoughtfully. I think she taught us something important, even though she was being mean. What's that, buddy? That we should never hurt people just because we're angry or scared. And if someone hurts us, we should protect ourselves instead of pretending it didn't happen. His wisdom amazed me. These children had learned crucial life lessons about boundaries, accountability, and self-protection through experiences I'd never wanted them to endure. But they'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident in their ability to recognize and respond to manipulative behavior. The story that began with destroyed concert tickets had become a masterclass in personal empowerment and family recovery. Sometimes the people who hurt us most teach us the most valuable lessons about our own strength and capacity for growth. Most importantly, I'd learned that protecting your family sometimes means protecting them from family members who choose destruction over construction manipulation, over genuine relationship, and immediate gratification over long-term responsibility. Emma and Tyler deserved a father who would stand up for them against anyone who tried to use their love as a weapon. They'd seen that father emerge during our darkest family crisis, and they'd learned to trust that he would continue protecting them going forward. The quiet revenge had become something much more powerful, a demonstration of how integrity, accountability, and proper consequences can transform destructive situations into opportunities for justice and genuine healing. As we prepared for their talent show performance, I realized that Jessica's cruelty had accidentally given my children something invaluable: absolute confidence in their father's commitment to their well-being and his willingness to fight for their happiness against any opposition. That confidence would serve them well throughout their lives, long after the drama of destroyed concert tickets and criminal prosecutions had faded into family history. They'd learned that love means protection, that boundaries create safety, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful choices. The Thunder Valley songs they'd practiced so diligently had become anthems of resilience, creativity, and triumph over adversity. Their upcoming performance would celebrate not just musical talent, but the strength they'd developed through surviving and thriving despite family members who'd tried to teach them their place through cruelty and manipulation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting the people you love most? Sometimes the hardest decisions we make as parents or partners involve setting boundaries with relatives who mistake our kindness for weakness. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and how you've navigated situations where love and protection seem to conflict. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own experiences with difficult family relationships, please consider liking this video and sharing it with others who might benefit from knowing they're not alone in facing these challenges. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, and finding strength through adversity. Thank you for listening to my family's journey from manipulation to empowerment. I hope Emma and Tyler's resilience and wisdom inspire you to trust your own instincts about protecting the people who matter most in your life. Remember, real family builds each other up instead of tearing each other down. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful choices. Until next time, keep fighting for the people who deserve your protection and never let anyone convince you that accepting abuse is the same thing as showing love.